Okay, guys, and I hope you are great as you are watching this video. And as you know, this is our English class, and therefore, I will speak in English to you as I always do in class. I hope that you appreciate this gesture from my part because I want you to be exposed to the language as much as possible. And since this quarantine, you probably haven't been practicing English that much, and this is a great opportunity for you to come back to the English world, which is really important. And for our session today, we are going to review, or we are going to study, not to review because we haven't seen it, the reported speech. And this type of language and this part of language is really well used among users of English and also in Spanish. We always report things that somebody else said, and you want to communicate that information to someone else, so you have to mention that somebody said that, and that you want to do something about it, or that you want to transmit that information, pass it on, and this is what we use the reported speech for. There are many rules, there are many things that we have to be careful of. This is like a little more advanced grammar because not only you have to be paying attention to the reported speech structures, but also you have to be paying attention to the pronouns you use, the modals you use, and if you're saying something interesting, you don't say it in the past because it is if it is still relevant, you say it in the present, and all of those things count, and that makes us appear as better users of the language that is not our native language, but we are really trying to understand it, to apply it, and to use it. And to start this presentation, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the reported speech. And when you report things to people said in the past, the verb tense often shifts back. This means that if you say something in the past, you have to say it again in the past, or you may have to change it to the past perfect. It doesn't stay in that same tense. Let's look at some examples here. The plane's just a 16-seater. If you pay close attention to a yellow mark here, it doesn't take that much, my friends. And that's the verb to be, right? That's the apostrophe in S, and that means is. The plane is just a 16-seater. And then when you want to say that to somebody else, you should apply this form and say, the agent explained that the plane was just a 16-seater. What's the change here? What can you observe? Is in the original statement, was in your reported statement. And that is what the rule said. You shift the tenses. Here, that, and this part, they give it to you as something that you can add or omit. And I strongly suggest that you add it. In English and in real world, people speak with that a lot of the time. From 100 times, you are going to see people using that 85 times. Okay, so get used to using that. The British people mark it as something optional, but in American English, we must, and I would like you to apply it in your sentences and in your work. Use that as much as you can. Another example, the bus has left. Has left is present perfect. And then when you report that to somebody else, because they are asking you, and then you say, she informed me that the last bus had left. What do you notice here? Had is not present perfect, it is past perfect. That's the shift in tenses that you have to be aware of and you have to be careful of. Moving on. These modal verbs change in reported speech. If someone gives you a message and they use can, When you say that message, when you pass it on, you have to use could. That is the transition that you need to do. Example, can goes to could. Will changes into would. Remember, this part is being said by one person, and when you report that, you say it with this, and this is your part. This is when you say it. This is by the others, and this is when you say it. May goes to might, must go to had to. Please mark those, make a little list, a little note, pay attention to those because they are really, really important. Moving on, example here. I can stay here until Sunday. I'm sorry, I misread that. And then, if you want to say that information, you want to share it with somebody else, you said, he said he could stay there until Sunday. What is the change again? Can goes to could. That's what the rule says, and it is true. I've been using this for a little while now, and I've been applying this rule, and I haven't had any trouble whatsoever. So I suggest that you get accustomed, that you get used to this and change can to could if you have the need to do it. Next example, I will be in Geneva on Monday. And the little chart told us that will had to change for would, and she said that she would be in Geneva on Monday. That is a transition that I am so focused on because I want you to understand it. It happens. It is not just an invention. Will changes into would. You see the example there? I hope that you understand it. If not, we're going to have a live session so you can ask me the questions that you have from this. Moving on. May changes into might. And remember I told you about this a little bit in class? About might and may and the use of modals and how we use them kind of like incorrectly sometimes, depending on the probabilities of something happening. In this case, no probabilities have to do with anything. It's just the rule that says that may, if may is present in a statement made by one person, and you want to report that statement, or you want to say that statement to somebody else, you mention that might must be your modal. She said that there might be a delay. Is that okay? I hope it is. And I hope I'm not going too fast. But you can always pause the video and go back. You know how it's done. You are good with technology. And moving on, next example said, I must study during the weekend. And you must study during the quarantine. I'm so sorry, my friends. Can't do anything for you now. She said that she had to study during the weekend. Then again, what is the change that you notice there? No? No clue? Okay, I'm going to help you out a little bit. She had to. Instead of using must, you go and report what that person said using had to. Okay, so remember that. Must changes into had to. Are you okay? Moving on. These modal verbs don't change. Oh, thank God. Something that doesn't change. First, could doesn't change. If a person uses could when saying something, and if you are going to report that to somebody else, you are going to use could again. Okay, this is for the speaker and this is for the person who reports that. Again, should. Then the same thing. That person used should, and then if you want to report that, what she said or he said, you're going to use should as well. Would, the same thing. Might, again, the same, you're safe. And also used to. If someone uses used to communicate an idea, and you want to report that idea, you are going to use used to in your statement. Examples: I could swim when I was 4. Oh, this guy was lucky. I didn't even have water. I wouldn't even want to mention a pool. Okay, and she said that she could swim when she was 4. Okay, this person said it and used could. So now, when you report, you can use could, and there are no issues whatsoever with this. Okay, the next one. I should call my mother. She said that she should call her mother. What's happening here? Then again, the person is using should. When you report, you can use should, and you are going to be fine. Also, this parenthesis mark here, as I told you earlier in this video, please use that as much as possible. It is totally acceptable in real English. I think you've noticed that I use a lot of that in my statements when I speak English, and I hope that I set a good example for you, my friends. Moving on, I would help, but I'm late. You know, I mean, things get out of hand sometimes. And when you report that, you can say, he said that he would help, but he was late. What's the change? Nothing is changing. What is being used? What is being used? Laura might be late. Tim said that Laura might be late. Okay, this statement is not being told by Laura. Tim is the one that heard Laura. Then this guy is reporting to you, and then you are reporting to somebody else. Imagine that chain. Laura, and then Tim, and then you are reporting what Tim said, not what Laura said. Laura said that, but now Tim might have changed it a little. So when you report things, make sure that you report the right thing. Don't be adding or removing information. If you do that, that is called gossiping. And we do it a lot. I guess I'm right on that. Cannot deny it. I'm going to have a little sip of water. My mouth gets dry. And time expressions often change too. What's time expressions, Professor? Yesterday, tomorrow, today, last month, this month, the day after tomorrow, the day before tomorrow. Those are time expressions. Example here, the flights are full today and tomorrow. And if you report that to somebody else, you have to change the time expressions and say, the receptionist said the flights were full that day, which stands for today, and the next day, which is tomorrow. And since here you are not leaving, that things are not happening in that same time, you don't report and say today and tomorrow, because that would be wrong. You don't even know the exact time anymore. Okay, you're reporting what they say, and it was that day and the next day. It's not really happening at this particular time in the present. Going further, common errors. Hey, most favorite part of all here. Common errors. Use an indirect object after tell. This means you can use indirect objects after tell. You can, but not after explain or say. What's an indirect object? Now you're killing us with all this grammar, sir. No, the indirect object responds the question, who? In this case, me is the indirect object because it answers the question, who? This action is being done by who? By me. This is the indirect object. In this case, if you use the verb told, you can use the indirect object right after. But if you use it said, don't use the indirect object, please, except here. And he told me the flight was full. Please don't say he told the. No, after told you need me. Not me exactly, but someone. The one that is reporting or saying the action. Could be them, could be him, her. You have to change your pronoun there and make sure you have it right according to who's saying the things that you are reporting. You have to be more cautious about things going around the sentences now. It's not that clear, it's not that simple anymore. And he said the fly was full. Please don't say, he said me. That is not right. He said me. No. You can say, he told me, but don't say, he said me. Okay? And I hope we are clear up to this point. Questions and instructions in reporter speech. Okay, the structures that we reviewed in the past slides were statements, negative or positive statements. Now we're coming to questions and instructions in reporter speech. And they are somewhat not that confusing if you pay attention to the rules. And I'm going to read this literally. Reported questions use the word order of statements. If you have a question, if a person speaks to you and they ask a question and you want to report what that person said to somebody else, you don't use the question structure, you change it as if it were a statement. Example, they do not have question marks. Another thing is, if you're going to report a question, please don't add the question mark. It doesn't need it because it's not going to be a question anymore. It's going to be a statement. I'm sorry. Not an, it'll be a statement, okay? For example, if someone asks, are you married? And then when you report that, you have to say, people often ask me whether if I'm married. You see this? You don't have any question mark whatsoever. You're not repeating the question. You are making the transition of the question to a statement. Here, whether means if. This is the same thing, but whether it can be considered a little more formal. Okay, I'm giving you two options here: whether or if. Both are correct, and you can use them in the same cases. What do you take with you? Yeah, I misspelled this one. It happens, guys, I'm sorry. We asked people what they take or took with them. You see that? If you are now reporting the question, you are making that into a statement, and it is perfectly fine. Going further, why shouldn't I use hotel shampoo? People ask you that, and you want to report that because they ask you, what did he say to you? And you're going to say, oh, he said. Then he asked me why she shouldn't use hotel shampoo. You see this? You don't have the question anymore because in the question you had why and then shouldn't. And then in the statement you have why, the subject, and then the modal. Yes? You don't need to shift back the verb tense when you report information about the present or future that is still true or relevant. Examples of that. Do you have any kids? I have two. Oh, okay. A woman asked me if I have kids. Remember, like in the statements that we reviewed already, we changed the present for the past. Well, in this case, since the information is still relevant and is still like personal and interesting to us, we use the present. If I have kids, I told her, in this case, this is the past, but then her, I have two. We go back to the present. We don't change it all to the past because it is still relevant. Where are you going on your next trip? That's another question. And then you report, he wanted to know where I am going on my next trip. You don't say where I was going. It is still relevant. It is still in the present. It is still important to use. So you have to use the present. Next, use an infinitive after ask, tell, order, advise. Okay, pay attention to those verbs. Ask, tell, order, and advise. Going back, thank you. Going back. And what do we use those for? Well, we use them to report a request, a suggestion, or an instruction. Going on now, thank you. Can you lend me a flashlight? And you have to use the infinitive. Not just the verb in infinitive form, but also using the particle to. To, yes? To. My sister asked me to lend her a flashlight. Can you lend me a flashlight? And you report that and say, my sister asked me to lend. And the rule said that after the verb ask, and then you have the indirect object. Oh, there you go now. And then the infinitive, as infinitive form, plus to. Okay? Don't use hotel shampoo. A friend advised me not to use hotel shampoo. And what happened here with don't? We don't put it in our reported speech anymore, and we only mention the particle not. That is when you can use that. When you use not, then you don't have to use do not or did not. A friend advised me not to use hotel shampoo, and that is perfectly fine. That is it, guys. That is my presentation, and I hope that you can watch it and learn a lot from it. If you have any doubts, anything that you want to share, you are more than welcome to do it tomorrow in the live session, and I hope that you can assist. I don't have anything else to say, and I'll say thank you for your attention, and see you soon, my friends.